Welcome to Lair the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, another in my series of what I call In Defense Of. This is where I take an album that maybe a certain section of the band's fan base does not like, maybe another section of the fan base does like it, and I come to its defense. So the album that I've picked for today is Metallica's 1991 self-titled album, more commonly known as the Black Album. Now you might be saying to yourself, why on earth are you coming to the defense of an album that has sold 16 million copies in the US alone? It's one of the biggest selling metal albums and hard rock albums of all time. It's an album that put Metallica into a whole nother stratosphere with their career. Well, the reason why I'm coming to its defense is because if you talk to Metallica fans or metal fans that are more around my age or just heard about Metallica, discovered Metallica at some point during the first four albums, especially people that were with them from the beginning, like I was. A lot of times that fan base, they end with And Justice for All. They love the first four albums, and then they don't like the Black Album and everything after that. And they'll often say, oh, the Black Album is, they sold out on that record, or they stopped being a real metal band, or they stopped being a thrash band. And I get some of the complaints because Metallica certainly made a decision to go in a different direction after And Justice for All. But one of my things in defense of this is that I don't really think Metallica could have kept going in the direction that they were going. And what I mean by that is when they did And Justice for All, they tried to make for them, sort of a technical, proggish, if you will, thrash metal, heavy metal album. And I don't think Metallica really could have gone to another level after. They couldn't have gone more proggy, more technical after that. They're just, for Metallica, And Justice for All was as far as they could go. I did a milestone moments on Megadeth, Rust in Peace. And I mentioned that I don't think Metallica could have made that album because Lars Ulrich couldn't have played drums on Rust in Peace. Kirk Hammett is not the same guitar player as Marty Friedman, and et cetera, et cetera. So for Metallica, And Justice for All was really, as far as, in my opinion, they could have gone with that style, with the playing fast, with the technical thing. They had already done the real fast playing on the first two records, Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning. Master of Puppets had a lot of thrashy moments. They were already stretching out on Master of Puppets with longer songs, more technical, more proggish type things. And And Justice for All, for me, was the logical conclusion for that. So every band comes to a point where they have to make a decision. What are we going to do? Are we going to keep trying to play faster and faster and faster? Are we going to try to keep making longer and longer songs? And some bands continue down that path, and other bands like Metallica realize that they needed to make a change and that they couldn't really go past And Justice for All with that kind of sound. So they make the Black Album. And so it makes sense to me why they would want to move more in that direction. Now, a lot of people would say that they need to go that far, that they need to be that commercial, that they need to slow down that much. Well, to me, it's what they were feeling at that time. It's the direction that they wanted to go in. And in hindsight, and this is sometimes when I have this discussion with metal fans my age, is, oh, the Black Album, I hate that album. That's when Metallica lost it. That's when they went commercials, when they started to suck. Well, or they'll say that album stinks. Well, that may be your personal opinion of that record, But the record was an absolutely gargantuan, massive, huge success. I mean, this record, if you look up like the best-selling records of all time in any genre, this album is up there. It sold 16 million copies in the US alone. They toured for like 2 years straight for this record. And this album took them into a headlining stadium band. And they have basically stayed in that position since then. I saw Metallica on their last tour, and they played a stadium to 30,000 people. And the tickets were expensive. So, you can say you don't like this record, but it was a very successful record. So to say, oh, it was a terrible career move, no, it wasn't. In a way, it was a great career move for them. Could they have sold as many records if they had made a more thrashier, more proggier, more technical album than And Justice for All? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, what do I listen to the most? I listen to the first 4 Metallica albums. That's when I discovered them and followed them. Those are my favorite Metallica albums. But when I hear people dumping, and people in my category, my age group, dumping on this album, sometimes I have to say, well, first of all, the album was a massive, massive success for them. And I don't see any other... As a career decision, I think it was the smart thing for them to do. I think if they had tried to be more technical after And Justice for All, I don't know if it would have worked. And the other thing is that this album came out in 1991, and they were able to survive the 90s. I've talked about this before in some other videos and on my in conversations with friends. There are not many 80s era metal bands that survived and thrived. Their careers moved forward, moved higher in the 90s. There's very few of them. There's Metallica. There's Ozzy. Ozzy released No More Tears in like 91, 92, right before the grunge explosion happened, which when the grunge bomb dropped, at least here in the States, it basically wiped out practically every 80s metal act, except for a very small handful of people. Metallica managed to survive. Ozzy managed to survive. I mean, maybe you could say AC/DC, although they weren't really releasing a lot of records in the 90s at that point. But for Metallica, their career, probably their best years were in the 90s. And the other thing is that for some people, this album is their gateway to heavy metal. If you talk to somebody who was a teenager, early teens, when this album came out, maybe they were 11 or 12 years old when this album came out, this is their first introduction to Metallica. As we all know, they had numerous videos being constantly played on MTV or constantly on the radio. So for a certain generation, this is their introduction to Metallica. And this could be a lot of people's, and I've heard kids say this, that this was their gateway to heavy metal. From here, they went back and listened to some of the other Metallica albums. Maybe they discovered Ozzy, they discovered Black Sabbath. It was their door to heavy metal. And for me, is that such a bad thing? No. And like I said, this album allowed Metallica to survive and thrive in the 90s through the dark days of metal, at least here in the States with grunge and everything. And the other thing is when I was thinking about this record, I made a playlist in my Amazon Music account, and I took out all the songs that are played to death that they had videos for. And I was left with, I think, 8 songs. I'm going to go through them here. And it made for I really enjoyed listening to these songs. So the songs that I picked were Holier Than Thou, which is kind of now there's nothing on this record that's as fast and thrashy as Battery or the song Ride the Lightning or Fight Fire with Fire. There's nothing as thrashy as that. But there are some moments where there are a lot of moments where that they do get pretty heavy, and Holier Than Thou is one of them. It's a pretty aggressive song. Don't Tread on Me. It's another one that I put on my playlist. That's pretty heavy. Through the Never is another one that's, I don't know if I'd say it was thrashy, but it's on the verge of that. It's pretty heavy. It's pretty fast. Of Wolf and Man is a really cool one. You know, it's sort of settled back, a little mid-tempo. Of Wolf and Man. Going back to Through the Never. Nothing, never, through that, never. You know, that's a pretty aggressive one. And then this is a double record set here. So the very last side, The God That Failed is a pretty dark, heavy one. My Friend of Misery is really cool. It's got a really neat bass intro to it. The Struggle Within, the album ends with that, and that's a really cool one. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I was able to pick out 7 songs that didn't get played to death on MTV and the radio. And it came out to, I think, a little over 30 minutes, like 32 minutes worth of music. And that in itself, to me, would be a really great album. Now, again, I'm going to be honest with you. There's songs on here that I cannot listen to. I cannot listen to Enter Sandman. I've heard that so many times. If I never hear that song again, I'm totally fine with that. I cannot listen to Nothing Else Matters. I can't listen to that song. Stuff like Sad But True, I do like that. Wherever I May Roam, I think is cool. So you take out just a couple songs here, and it's actually, for me, a really enjoyable listen. Is it better than Ride the Lightning or Master of Puppets? No. But does it deserve the sort of scorn and hate that it gets from the traditional metal community, the people that, you know, are set in the 80s version of Metallica? I don't think it's that bad. I mean, and I get it. If they deliberately slowed things down here, they went for a different style, but you can't argue that it didn't work for them. You know, it sent them into the absolute stratosphere. The production on the record by Bob Rock is fantastic. I mean, Lars's drums sound great. Usually, it seems like after this record, you know, the last 3 Metallica records, there's always some sort of sonic issue. Saint Anger, the terrible snare drum sound. Death Magnetic, the distorted, overcompressed mix. You know, and Justice for All before this, the no bass guitar in the mix. You know, there always seem to be things with Metallica. But on this record, man, this is a heavy, thick, punchy, very, very well produced records. The guitars are really thick, and there's sort of the sound. They're sort of pulled back a little, more of a doomy, if you will, at times. Some of these riffs, more of a, you know, Lars is playing a little bit more straightforward. I don't know if there's any double bass drum on this record. If there is, it's very, very minimal. But sonically, it sounds really, really good. And you know, like I said, in hindsight, I think it was the record that they had to make at this point. Because if you look at a lot of their peers, Megadeth and Anthrax and Testament and Slayer, as much as I love those bands, you know, in the 90s, they didn't fare very well. Yeah, they struggled through the 90s. And Metallica took a step into another realm, another stratosphere of fame, if you will. Now, I do agree that the 2 albums that came after this, Load and Reload, those are I cannot listen to those records. And to me, those records are the Black Album, massive success, and they were just trying to copy that. it's clear when they went from Injustice for All to the Black Album, they wanted to do something different. And Metallica was, for the most part, leading up to this point, every album was a little bit different. They were trying to get better. They were trying to do something different. They've always done that. They've always tried to do different things, and sometimes it fails. Sometimes it fails miserably, like the Lulu thing. You could say Saint Anger. But yeah, I gotta at least give Metallica credit for they try to do different things. Now the last two Metallica albums, I would say that they're trying to recapture a little bit of some half part classic first four albums, second part Black Album. They're not as experimenting as much as they did for a little while there. But for me, if I take out Enter Sandman and Nothing Else Matters, and even like, let's say, I like The Unforgiven, and I do like Wherever I May Roam and Sad But True. But even if you took those out, the rest of the songs on here are really, really cool. There's some really good stuff on here. So all right, let me know what you think of this record. Like I said, it seems to be a really sort of polarizing record, and it really depends on when you discovered Metallica, where you land on this topic. So let me know what you think of this album. Let me know what you like and what you don't like about this record. Let me know down in the comments below. If you haven't listened to this record in a while, I challenge you to listen to it again and skip over some of these tracks that are like, I've heard these way too many times, skip over those and just go to those 7 or 8 tracks that I mentioned. And I think you might see it in a little bit of a different light, and it might work a little bit better. If you haven't listened to it in a while, check it out again. It had been a really long time since I listened to it, and I had just sort of written off in my mind that I can't listen to this record. But then when I really started listening to it and getting into it, I was like, yeah, there's a lot of really, really good stuff on here. So, all right, let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.